This is the first presentation. I am going to be covering IT consultancy, business and project management. This is an area that I've been involved in for about 20 years or so. So I will go through a couple of agenda items for everyone. I'll be looking at the pathways or the different roles that exist within business and IT. I'll start off with IT first, and then I'll go into business and project management. The sort of strategy that you should take when deciding on a career within IT or business. I'll talk about some practical steps that you can actually take to stand out amongst the crowd. Then one particular area that a lot of people are interested in when I do some of these sessions, that is, what do I need to do with my CV? How do I tailor my CV so that it's more attractive to the recruiter? And then some comments on what the do's and don'ts are of interviews, especially during these times when we're facing a lockdown. So, IT. Now, within IT, there are several different areas. So you'll commonly hear first, second and third line opportunities that exist. When they talk about first line, they're essentially talking about the IT operational elements. Okay, so that's the things such as working on a service desk. Now, a service desk isn't just about picking up a phone, basically resolving customer issues. You can actually also do first line operation activity, which means that you can go on site to customers, help them at their desk. There are also, just give me a second. I am informed that I'm not. Can I just ask the presenters, Alan, can you see my screen with the IT pathway? Yeah?
No.
Okay. You can't see my screen?
Nope. Yeah, I can see it now, Sean.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. All right. So this is the screen I was talking about. So within IT operations, as I said, there's different roles. So the first line is service desk and remote support. Then you move on to second line activity, and that is around networking, a kind of prominent and focused area at the moment is something called hybrid cloud. So this is referred to as software as a service, or shortened to SaaS. That's very in at the moment. It's one of the key skills that we look for, and I know a lot of business areas, in particular, the likes of Google and Facebook are interested in, and these then naturally kind of evolve into other areas. Then you have occupations around solution architects. These are the guys who design the systems. So the sort of databases you need, the basic infrastructure that make up an IT system. When we talk about third line, we're essentially talking about the back-end activity that works. So whenever you have an organization, you basically have a back-end system which is comprised of databases. So that's your record keeping areas. It might be a CRM system, and all of these are maintained by what we call system administrators and DBAs, or database administrators. A common area that's also evolving probably within the last 5 to 10 years is called API and DevOps. So DevOps is made up of development and operations, bringing these together. And as I mentioned a second ago, Google in particular is is a leader in this area, and it's something that I'm particularly interested in, and I've got a team working on that specifically. Another area that is possibly of interest is data analysis and reporting. You'll start to see that a lot of senior management are interested in the data that's held within their various systems and how to extract that information. And then finally, within IT, you've got those developers. Those developers include application developers, website developers. You've also got Android and Apple, so application development in terms of the apps that you see on your mobile phone. And whenever you develop something, you obviously have to have testers. So these guys are under the remit of quality assurance. So a website has to be tested thoroughly several times before it's released, the same as an app, so that you don't encounter the bugs. And that's the reason why you see a lot of updates with applications that you have on your phone. And then there's a release management process, so you can consider a career in change management or release management. Quickly moving on to business and project management. So when I refer to PM means project manager. There are various areas within business. So you've got auditing, you've got marketing and advertising. You've also got business areas within the normal day-to-day, so finance, HR professionals, and you've also got consultants who go out to businesses and give advice. These strategy consultants are naturally within 5 to 10 years, or they have 5 to 10 years experience behind them to be able to give advice. Before you move on to project management, there are a few steps that you need to take, and that may include business analysis. So undertaking activity within project planning, business analysis includes actually deep diving into a particular area and helping understand business processes, which you then write up and provide to developers who then do the coding. And as I've covered data analysis, I'll skip on to project management. So project management has evolved over the last 10 to 20 years. The starting point is business analysis and the project management office. So within the project management office, you have a number of roles that could include being a junior project manager. Once you've got that experience behind you, you move on to actually managing a project yourself. And one of the key things that's coming about more recently is an agile delivery manager, so ADM. You'll hear concepts such as Prince 2 and waterfall and agile methodology. Whenever you hear the word waterfall, it still continues to this day, but agile is the new way of delivering a project. And if you've got questions on agile and waterfall methodology, happy to answer those in the Q&A. And then another area that you may be interested in is accountancy and law. So you've got audit and tax areas that you can go into. That might be the top 4, but there are also a number of other organizations that cover these areas. You've got accountancy, as I've mentioned before, advisory. So a specialist area that you could go into is, for example, tax is a specialist advisory area, but you can also go into security. And obviously cybersecurity is a prominent thing at the moment. And there's also obviously professions such as lawyers and solicitors. Whilst I won't be able to answer questions on that specifically, if you do have any, feel free to let us know at contact@bhdi.org, and we'll have one of our representatives who are in that field answer that for you. Okay. So what do you need to do to kind of focus your career into these areas? Firstly, you need to be honest with yourself and start to decide what you enjoy. So where I talk about choose your field, the first step is to make sure that it's an area that you enjoy, because you're going to be doing it day in, day out. If you think about a typical 9-to-5 job, you're spending most of your day in that workplace. So try and find something that you like and something that you enjoy. And then try and research the industry. So, for example, the different types of roles that exist. What are the various areas that you can actually evolve into? What is your aim? Do you want to be a director at the end? Do you want to be a manager? Researching helps you pin down what you want to basically achieve in your chosen field. And then there's several ways to get into that. For example, if you're a college or school leaver, you can look into apprenticeships. The government is offering a number of programs from IT to business to data analysis opportunities. So start to look into those. And if you're a graduate, then you can look into graduate programs that basically exist out there. And we'll cover these in detail in a little while. And then think about how often you're applying to these roles. Okay, you need to dedicate time. Whenever you have an ambition, you've got to dedicate time. Whether you want to be a sprinter, going to the Olympics, or you want that job, you have to dedicate time. So what I would recommend is you spend around 2 hours every 3 days, so twice a week, looking for a job. And if you want to know what those days are, I would recommend Tuesday and Wednesday to apply for a job, and then a Sunday. That's because when you apply on a Sunday, most likely on Monday morning, the recruiter will see your CV or application first. Once you've chosen your field, start to research the various companies. There's a website called Glassdoor that tells you a lot of things. So it talks about the reviews of the organization that you may be interested in. It talks about the management structure. It talks about the work-life balance. And then there's also, if you look deeper, there's the transferable skills. What skills do I need to be successful in this role? So use Glassdoor, use LinkedIn, use the company, various company sites to understand those transferable skills. And then tailor your CV. Now I'm going to cover that in detail in a little while, but with that information that you've gained, you can then start to structure the sort of content you need to put on your CV. And then finally, on focusing, use your networking opportunities. Okay, networking is referred to by business many times in articles, in blogs, and so on. And the reason why we say that is it's an opportunity to interact with those in that particular field. So if you're not on LinkedIn and you're interested in business and IT and project management, I would suggest that you sign up to LinkedIn. It's free, and create yourself a profile. Okay, and then connect with your personal network, whether that's your cousins, whether that's basically friends and family, whether it's your teacher. You will find majority of the people that you know who are in those areas actually in LinkedIn. But also use that connection with those individuals to identify opportunities that exist within their business in your chosen area. Okay, and at the same time also, if there are no paid roles and you're still searching for a job, then consider doing voluntary work or shadowing of basically, for example, for a day or two here and there, and just to understand the sort of skills that are required for that role. Okay. What practical steps can you take? Okay. Well, just before I delve into that, I want to talk about what's put me in this position to be able to speak to you about the kind of recruitment that goes on. Because one of the biggest challenges is to get your basically front foot through the door. I can tell you personally, I've probably seen about 600 to 700 odd CVs. That's just a rough estimate. And of that, I probably will discard most CVs on the first look. And that's why tailoring your CV is so important. Once you've done that, basically, I'd say I've probably done 100 odd, 125, 130 or so, and that's just a rough number, of telephone interviews. And telephone interviews typically last between 50 and 30 minutes, so you can gauge the person, talk about some of the specifics around the skills that's been highlighted on the CV, before that person is then moved on to interviews. So interviews are of different types, so face-to-face interviews. You may also include psychometric or technical testing in that. And then once you've gone through that stage, about 5 to 10% is the actual hiring average. Some people have more, some people have less. I can tell you I've probably hired more than 30. At the moment, I've got about 36 staff and 89 indirectly. And so the various skill sets are key for success, and identifying those skill sets and knowing what's required is what's going to get you in front of that recruiter. Okay, so where do you start? Firstly, it's about your mindset. Okay, once you get in that zone and say, actually, I'm ready to apply, what do I need to do? Well, there's an acceptance element, and that is every time you apply, you're not going to get a rejection letter. It's just going to go into a pile and you're not going to get any communication. Okay, I will talk about success. The first thing is to say is not to basically get downsided, not to be dejected if you don't hear back. Okay, so accept that there's going to be rejections, but then you take that into a positive step. Okay, you keep persisting and you say to yourself, actually, I want to apply for this role and I'm going to continue and I'm going to continue, and you've got to keep doing it. It's a repetitive process. Okay, and then finally, we need to look at what your strategy is, because if you're getting constantly rejected, actually, we may have to change things around. So we'll look at CV and interview techniques. Okay. Why do I talk about rejection first, basically, before I go into success? And that is because it's going to continually happen. Okay, so what should you know? There's a statistic that goes around in kind of business and IT areas, and that is for every 100 or so applications that you make, okay, you are going to get one reply. Now, I didn't say a reply to basically for an interview. I didn't say a reply to offer you a job. I just said a reply. And that reply could be, thank you for your application, and that's it. Okay, so just to get a reply, you've got to make 100 applications. So you can see how many applications you've got to do to basically kind of put your right foot forward. And so please continue to persist in your applications. That's important. Okay, why do we actually reject CVs? There's a couple of things. That is, sometimes there's a lot of content. If your CV is 3, 4, 5 pages long, it's too much to read. It's too much for us to kind of derive information from. And that's the reason why we basically will just reject it, even if you're the best candidate. Okay? And you've got to make sure it's clear and concise. All right? And always remember that you can ask for feedback. That tends to happen when you get to the interview stage. Okay? I mentioned persistence. Persistence is the one that's going to drive you. Okay, just continually applying, but making sure you adapt your strategy. Okay, so keep up your enthusiasm. Make sure you're motivated to apply, even if you've got those 100 rejections. Okay, and as I said, if you're not hearing back, take a step back and ask somebody. Okay, you may review your CV and you might not spot anything. You might want to review your cover letter and you might not spot anything. Why don't you ask someone else to do that for you? Because it's always good to have somebody else look over your CV in case there's spelling mistakes, basically, if it's not clear in terms of what you're trying to get across. Okay. And then finally, as I said in the previous slides, what days are you applying? Okay. If you're applying on a Monday, that's when most jobs go basically go online. So applying on a Monday is not the best time. Give it a few days, think about a Wednesday, possibly a Thursday, and then as I said, on a Sunday is a good day. Okay. Tailoring your CV. But this is where I wanted to spend a lot of time. Okay. Because the CV is the first step to getting in front of that recruiter. All right. it's your opportunity to sell yourself. Okay, so you're essentially marketing yourself to the individual who's actually reviewing those pages that you've submitted. Okay, and so you need to ask yourself a couple of questions, and that's what I've put: who, what, and why. Okay, you need to just give them a brief introduction and say who you are. Okay, I'm Shah Hussain, you know, I'm British, I'm basically living in this area, London, and so on. Okay, and then you move straight on to what do you have to offer, whether that's your technical skills, whether that's your educational skills. You need to let them know what you're offering them. Okay, and then finally you have to answer the questions: why should they hire you? And that is going to be based on the advert that you see for that job. Okay, so what can you basically take in terms of, or what can you do when you're looking at your CV? Remember, before you send a CV or a covering letter, to customize. Every job was, for example, an IT technician or a junior project manager. It might seem the same. Actually, it might be in a different industry. And so it's always important to customize. Okay, so just before you hit send, look at the CV, look at the covering letter, and see if you've basically covered all the key points that they need. Okay, if we focus on covering letter, try and make sure that you have 3 or 4 different versions. Okay, so you'll have different notes to say, I've got experience in basically project management from when I did a university project, and then cover off some key skills. And then the following one, you may want to highlight your voluntary opportunity because it's working for a charity or because it's working for a educational establishment or something. So you just have to basically move the paragraphs about, but try and have 3 or 4 different versions that you can quickly basically drag off and paste onto an email or a cover letter. Okay, and make sure you cover the key skills. What are they looking for? And make sure that's in the first or second paragraph at minimum. Okay, with regards to your CV, also have 3 or 4 versions. For example, you might have a junior project manager CV, you might have a project planning or a PMO office CV, okay? Or you may say, actually, I just want to go into a business analyst role first for the next 5 years, and so I'm just going to focus on analysis, so data reporting that you've done. These are all business analysis techniques, basically, where you've gathered information, where you've done reporting. Make sure you highlight that, and so have those 3 or 4 different CVs available to you. Okay, as I said, if you're not getting responses, even in reply of acknowledgement, make sure you're looking at your CV and updating it, or have someone look at it. Okay, and then the final point on this is 2 pages is ideal. 3 pages is if you're someone very experienced. Okay, if you feel that you've got 10 years experience, well, actually even then you still have to condense it down. But for this session, we're talking about 1 to 2 pages. 1 page if you don't have experience behind you, 2 pages even if you've got other volunteering opportunities. For example, you may have been a society member. Highlight that. That's a good thing because it talks about teamwork as well. Okay. What should your CV contain? What should it look like? Okay, I talked about marketing. When you go in to buy something, a product, whether it's a car, whether it's perfume, whether it's basically a mobile phone, just because you want a BMW or you want an iPhone, that's not going to sell itself. Okay, there may be different types of basically storage space in a mobile phone. Okay, 56, so you can store your pictures and social media and so on. For a car, whether it's got basically automatic wipers, whether it's a particular color and so on. What the agent or the sales agent job is to actually sell that product to you. And so here, you're the product, okay? You need to sell yourself. So when you write a CV, okay, or a covering letter, or the email that you send to us basically, and it says, I'm applying because I like IT, I'm applying because I like business analysis, that doesn't say anything. It just says you like something, you have an interest in an area. Whereas if you then basically change that round. And I'm not going to read through this, I'm just going to cover the first one. As I said, it will be in the presentation pack, okay? If you mention things such as, you know, the skill sets that you've mentioned reflect what I have, because I've worked in an IT department, I've configured switches and networks and so on, or I've connected a printer. Or you might say, I've done a volunteering opportunity, or I've shadowed somebody. Highlight that in the top line, okay? There's a message about links. I don't want to interrupt myself. Ellen, if you don't mind, just check if there's any issues with the links. That'd be great. So to continue with this, make sure that it's a sentence with some information. Even if you don't have IT specific skills or business basically specific skill, you can talk about your project experience working in university or college when you did a project together. Okay? Make sure you sell yourself. In order to sell yourself, you have to stand out. Okay? So focus on the actual content of your covering letter, of your CV, okay? I'm just going to go through some examples of sort of things that you can include, because this is what's lacking. As I said, I genuinely probably spend a minute or two at most looking at CVs, and if things don't stand out, I won't give it a second look, if I'm completely honest with you. So make sure that you basically highlight key areas, focus on the content, okay? So if you have an interest in IT, you might say you built your first computer with limited resources, okay? You may actually say, I'm interested in business analysis, project management. You can say, I had to produce a report. I had to gather data. I had to basically work in a team to produce a presentation for my college, school, university. That is all skills that's related to business and project management. It also relates, by the way, to marketing and so on. So even though I mentioned IT and business, it relates to all of these. Data sets, marketing activity, all require teamwork, or require interaction with customers and so on, okay? Now, I mentioned this kind of, you know, we get lots of CVs. For one job, I probably received 100, 150 odd basically applications. So how do you stand out? Okay. So you have to ask yourself, what is it that I'm going to mention on here that makes me stand out from everybody else who's applying? So you might want to say you were basically you were selected to represent the school in a county competition. Great. That shows that basically, you know, you've got skills, you're competitive, you basically are best in your field, if that makes sense, in that particular area because you're being asked to represent. Okay, so then, for example, an athlete, saying that you were the first to achieve a first class or to go to university is not a bad thing. It shows drive, it shows ambition. So mention that. And you may also say, you know what, I also did some teaching for family members. Perfect. It shows that you can basically deliver, you can communicate. All of these things are worth putting in a CV if you don't have lots of experience behind you, okay? Then make sure you look at the advert itself, okay? If you think about it, an advert should contain what you're going to do on a day-to-day basis. So from that, pick up the key skills. I talk about CRM, that refers to client relationship management, okay, in databases. What does it say? Does it talk about something called Dynamics 365? Does it talk about SQL databases? Okay, if you're into business analysis, project management, and you've used MS Project in a university activity, mention that. What if you've worked in retail? What are the transferable skills that you can take to basically make sure you match the skills that I mentioned in that advert? Customer communication, financial management. You've taken cash, you've put it in the register, you've given them a receipt. So if you're interested in finance, basically that's an area. When you're in a retail shop selling a piece of cloth, basically or clothing, or a perfume product or chocolates and so on, you must know your product. That's advertising. you can basically mention that, and that shows your skills. Okay. Interaction with customers is in every role. And then finally, IT audit and security. Mention things like GDPR. We all know what basically data protection is. It's all on social media. We've all heard news about WhatsApp changing its security and so on and so forth. Okay, just knowing these basics and saying that you're aware of it actually is going to put you in good light. I'm now going to move on to interviews. One of the things to know about interviews is different people have different techniques. Okay, so no two interviews are the same. You might be asked to go and do a technical test, for example. So before you even get to see someone face to face, you've been selected because you've done well on your CV and you've presented yourself. They'll ask you to complete basically a test online. All right, so that might be a 30-minute online test, logical reasoning and so on and so forth. Okay, if it's an IT, they might ask you for an IT specific test that you may have to do. For business analysis, they'll ask you, and I'm sure you're all familiar with psychometric testing, basically things to do with logical reasoning, verbal reasoning. This is where your past experiences around interaction with customers come in. Okay, and knowing areas such as ITIL and so on is good. Okay. Remember, you can either have a one-to-one interview or a panel interview. So sometimes you get presented with one person, or it might be a panel of three, depending on who they are, and sometimes HR get involved. Okay. With psychometric testing, it's more common in graduate programs, but there are techniques to pass psychometric testing. Please let me know if you've got questions at the end and on some tips and tricks that you can do with psychometric testing that will basically hopefully get you through the door. And as I mentioned, typically with interviews, there's 2-3 stages. So you'll have your technical test, you may have a telephone interview, and you'll basically have face-to-face. And then finally, questions, it depends. Okay, they may ask questions of your CV, they may actually ask you scenario-based questions. Tell me a time when you've basically worked in a team and so on. A lot of the time now, the questions are more tailored. So they may say, talk about a project that you've been involved in, where you've had to deliver an output. That one specific project is going to cover off team working. It's going to basically talk about requirements gathering and so on and so forth. Okay, and delivery. So these kind of scenario-based questions are something to keep an eye on, and most interviews are marked. So you'll be scored against basically how the examples you gave, your presentation skills and so on. Okay. Just a brief note before I start to finish off. Okay. Interviews during lockdown, please be aware. Okay. The environment, so your background. Make sure that there's not a lot of clutter. Okay. A neutral background is great. Make sure there's not a lot of noise around. All right, because most of these interviews are via Zoom or MS Teams, and they'll usually, or majority of the time, ask you to put your camera on. Okay, and even for these interviews, I would recommend that you wear a suit, at minimum a shirt and a tie. Okay, and make sure you have a good internet connection. As always, research the company. You can have some notes beside you, but don't focus on it. Just some key notes that you want to cover off in big letters. At least then it gives you a reminder to cover those areas. All right. And when they ask you if you've got any questions, please make sure you do ask questions. So some things you may ask are, can you give me an example of a typical day this role basically entails? Or what are the key projects that are coming up in the next 3 months that I may be involved in? All right. This is, I think, my second to last slide. So I'm going to give you some real life examples of people who've made it based on everything that I've said. Okay. The first one is someone I actually hired myself. Okay. The gentleman worked in Creams, the dessert shop that you may be aware of. All right. Doesn't have a degree, but had a passion. And when I saw his CV, a couple of things that stood out. When he came to interview with me, his passion, his drive for customer service stood out. He was confident. He basically was, he didn't have IT experience behind him. He just said, I want to deliver. I basically engage with customers, and he uses obviously his own terms, but that's what stood out for me. I offered him a role on the apprenticeship scheme, and he's been on it for a year and a half. And I can tell you, as of last Monday, he's basically being offered a permanent role. Okay. Another gentleman, he enjoyed traveling. And what he did was he basically wanted to become a scuba diving instructor. He did that for a few years, but then he realized he wanted to go into products, i.e. product management. He's now working in the US as a director on a project in product management. Now you can see scuba diving to product management, completely different things, but he was able to show his passion, i.e. sell a product, sell scuba diving to all those visitors, travelers who came, and he was then able to relay that into an audit piece of software. Okay. So in summary, stay positive, stay focused, make sure you're committed. So persistence is very important. Do not get demotivated if there are no rejections, if there are rejections or you don't get communicated back to. Okay, look at the transferable skills. Whether you're working in creams or a retail shop, what can you take from those skills, basically from those roles, and what skills can you transfer to actually the job that you're applying for? Tailor, customize your cover letter, customize and tailor your CV. And then each time when you attend an interview, when you basically get any feedback, make sure you take that skill. If you don't get that job at the first interview, try and identify why. Is it the presentation? Is it what you said? And then basically make sure you learn and improve each time. All right. I'm now going to pass on to Alimuddin, who, I'm just going to put myself on mute, who is going to cover medicine.
Hi everyone, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, so let's begin.
Yeah,
so just to introduce myself, I work as a GP in a practice in Tower Hamlets, where I've been a partner for the last over 13 years, and I've been a doctor since 2003. So basically in my partnership role, recruitment is one of the things that we do, recruiting nurses, doctors, so recruiting other partners, salaried GPs, also long-term locums, etc., as well as other staff. So if we move on to the next slide, sure. Yep. So these are things I'm hoping to cover today. So why choose a career in medicine? Then a little bit about getting into medicine, the process of applying for medicine, and then after you've graduated as a doctor, the different careers open to you. So the two main career paths, hospital careers, as well as my chosen career path, which is general practice. A little bit about the different types of careers and different working options within those careers. And then a little bit about making your CV stand out, because as you can imagine, in a career in medicine, you've got a lot of sort of high flyers, a lot of academically really able people. So there's not probably that much to differentiate one candidate from another, but there's certain things that you can do that you can have in your CV that probably make your CV stand out. And then to finish off with a little bit about interviews. So why a career in medicine? If you just click again, Shah. Yeah, so this meme obviously is, I think people who are from a South Asian kind of background will probably understand this. But generally, obviously this is a joke, but generally in certain cultures, I know that in the South Asian culture, because that's the culture I'm from, there is a bit of parental pressure to follow certain careers, medicine being one of them. So I just wanted to highlight that if you're going to pursue a career in medicine, you have to do it for the right reasons. You have to be interested in it. Firstly, because the degree itself is 5 or 6 years, which is very long and arduous, takes a lot of determination, very sort of academically demanding kind of degree. And then the training after you've graduated, shift work, etc., is very hard. And unless you're doing it for the right reason, unless you've got a genuine interest in it as a career, you may sort of drop off. And obviously changing careers isn't very easy. Okay, so when do you have to start thinking about a career in medicine? If you click again, Shah. So that's probably a bit too early. So those two, the cute little baby with the stethoscope and the toddler, that's probably way too early. But generally, I wanted to just differentiate between what I would call a vocational degree. So certain degrees are basically of a vocational nature. So it would include medicine, dentistry, veterinary medicine, pharmacy, law also as well to a certain extent. These are degrees where it's not just on a subject, but these degrees that directly basically lead to certain careers versus degrees which are based more like subject based. So you've got maths, chemistry, biochemistry, history, geography, those kind of degrees where the degree itself doesn't directly lead on to a career, but your career options would be more wide open. So with a vocational type of degree, you really need to start thinking much earlier than you would do with a subject-based degree as to whether you want to pursue that degree. And medicine is that type of degree. So after you've graduated would be too late, because by that time, if you haven't done a degree in medicine, say you've done a degree in, say, maybe chemistry, it would be too late. You can't do a degree in chemistry and pursue a career in medicine. Obviously, you still can, because you can apply for the graduate entry scheme. But if you wanted to go down the undergraduate kind of route, then it would be too late. And the college, when you're at college, again, that would probably be too late as well, because the A-levels that you will do in college need to be certain A-levels if you want to get into medicine, because medicine requires you to have done certain A-levels. So when you're at college, it's probably too late. So what you need to do is really generally start considering it at GCSE time, because that's when you're going to be applying for your A-levels, and you can apply for the right kind of A-levels, which will enable you to apply for medicine as a degree. Okay, so that moves us nicely onto the academic requirements. So as you can see, GCSE-wise, fairly kind of high kind of requirements. So academically, you generally need to be a bit of a high flyer, although obviously academic abilities isn't the only requirement for a career in medicine. There's multiple other qualities which are probably, in my opinion, much more important than academic ability, but academic ability is a very important requirement. With regards to A-levels, every university has slightly different requirements, but generally, chemistry is a subject that you will have to do, and 2 other out of either biology, physics, or maths. So if you do chemistry and 2 others out of those, then that will keep your options open for applying to most medical schools. And this is taken directly from UCAS website. So 3 A's it says, but a lot of universities now actually require A star in one of these subjects, as well as 2 A's. So I looked at a couple of medical schools. So the most local one to where I am, where I teach medical students from, Barts in the London, which is Queen Mary University, they require 1 A star and 2 A's, and a lot of other medical schools require that. Next slide, please, Shah. Okay, so first we've covered the academic requirements. Then you've got certain entrance exams that you need to do, basically, if you want to get into medicine. And these test a variety of things. They test your problem-solving skills, you know, your verbal reasoning, etc., various kind of things. And there's been a lot of research done onto these. And with these tests, I mean, so the UCAT test is University Clinical Aptitude Test. This was started in 2006, and the BMAT, which is the Biomedical Admissions Test, was started in 2001. And the reason behind these is because, as I mentioned before, a lot of the candidates who are applying for medicine will be very academically, you know, sort of high flying, doing really well academically, and there won't be that much if you to differentiate between them, and not much to kind of predict who's going to do well in a degree in medicine and a career in medicine. And these tests try to kind of predict that, and they sort of try and separate out the candidates. So depending on which university you want to apply for, you may want to do the UCAT or the BMAT, or you may want to do both. So as you can see, UCAT is required by the vast majority of universities, and then BMAT by Oxbridge, Imperial, and a few other universities. Interestingly, if you're going down the graduate kind of scheme, so where you're already graduated and you want to apply to a graduate kind of medical degree, then there is a separate entrance exam for that. So that's the GAMSAT, which is the Graduate Australian Medical School Admissions Test, which was brought over from Australia and first used by St. George's Medical School in 1999, I believe. So these you need to do. And then thirdly, work experience is very important. So work experience can either be you working in a care or healthcare setting, in particular with people who are ill, or it could be sort of direct observation of healthcare. And the reason why they want to see you having done some work experience is because they want to make sure that you're not going into medicine blindly, that you've had some sort of exposure to what a career in medicine would entail, and work experience kind of demonstrates that. There's no requirement in terms of how much work experience you should have, you know, in terms of hours, etc., but it has to be recent. So, you know, within the last 2 years. So, you know, there's no point in having work experience when you were in primary school where you would have had, so it has to be something recent, basically. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you, Shah. Yeah, so just wanted to give some examples of the types of work experience that you can do. So you could do some work experience in a nursing home. You could do a bit in a hospice. These are care settings that generally are less acute, probably where they likely to be able to accommodate you for work experience. You could also do some voluntary work in a hospital. All hospitals have a volunteering department. And this is something that you could do. This is something that I did at my local hospital, which is Royal London Hospital. It's something I really enjoyed, actually. It was quite fulfilling. Also, although I, you know, started off doing it because I needed it to apply for medicine, I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. I found it something really fulfilling. You could also do sort of work experience in a GP surgery. So we often get students, you know, who are doing A-levels, or sometimes when they're doing GCSEs coming in for work experience. With the hospital volunteer, what I wanted to just add is most of the hospitals have quite a bit of a waiting list, actually. So you need to kind of plan it a bit. You can't just decide that you want to do work experience and apply now. You need to kind of apply it for it in advance. And because work experience is fairly, you know, becoming more and more difficult to get and do, a lot of these companies that help students in getting into medical school, they're also developing. So there's one company called Unimed, and they do a course called Doctors for a Day. It's around £100, but it involves you doing a lot of the things that doctors would do on dummies, etc. And this is something that you can write on your, you know, personal statement in place of work experience or in addition to work experience. Okay, so you've got into medical school, you know, you've been through the 5 or 6 years, you've graduated. So what career options are then open to you? So generally in medicine, there's two career paths. One is a hospital career, and then the other one is the general practice. So if we talk a little bit about the hospital careers, so if you just click a few times sharp, please. So just wanted to go through the various careers. So you can see you've got medicine, you've got surgery, pathology, radiology, psychiatry, anesthesia. And then if you just click a few more times just to bring up all the options. So as you can see, and these lists aren't kind of comprehensive. There's a few specialities that I kind of left out. But I just wanted to show you the richness in terms of the various careers open to you in medicine. And you can see there's so many different careers. So regardless of your personality, regardless of whether you like working with people in teams or whether you like working by yourself, there's a career open for you. And each of these, so for example, if you take cardiology, if you take gastroenterology, within that speciality, there'll be multiple subspecialties. So there's so many different options for you to pursue, depending on your personality, depending on what you like. But that's the career that I didn't choose, the hospital path. The career that I did choose for myself is general practice. And that general practice is a very flexible career. It has a good work-life balance, and that's one of the main reasons why I chose it. I mean, currently I work 4 days a week. These are fairly longish days, but it gives me 1 day during the week off, in addition to having the weekends off. So I work as a partner. That obviously involves doing your clinical work as well as running the practice, etc. But then you've got, if you click a few more times sharp, then you've got sessional GP. So you could be a salaried GP, you could be a locum, and on top of that, depending on what you want. So if you've got an interest in a particular area, say musculoskeletal medicine, you could still pursue that interest in general practice. If you've got interest in ENT, say dermatology, there's, it's such a flexible career. You can build up your kind of portfolio depending on your interest. You could do out of hours work if you wanted to carry on, working in the hospital kind of setting. If you've got political kind of interest, you could work in the BMA, LMC. You could have roles in the CCG. You could do teaching also as well. You could be an appraiser. That's something that I do, where I appraise other GPs, make sure they're up to standard, etc. So then, basically, so with doctors, obviously everyone will have been through the same degree, essentially from different universities. So there won't be much to differentiate between candidates. Then you'll have people working in various hospitals. Again, won't be there much to differentiate them. One of the things that you can do to differentiate is doing voluntary work. So BHDI is the charity that organized this workshop for us. It's a charity that I and the other panel members are involved in. And one of the activities that we do is the medical camp. The last one we did was February 2020, where we went to Bangladesh, and we did 4 medical camps in various rural locations where we saw probably around 1,500 patients where they were seen free. We gave free medication to them. On top of that, we also organized a careers conference for medical students and young doctors that was attended by 300 people. So as you can see from the pictures, it was an incredible experience. I wish I had the opportunity to do something like this even earlier on in my career. It was very fulfilling. And this is the kind of thing, if you have on your CV, it will really, really make your CV stand out. It's the kind of thing that if you have on your CV, the person who's going through your CV will want to meet you, will want to talk about these experiences. So this is something I would encourage you to do. It doesn't have to be with BHDI. Any kind of voluntary work, this kind of work will really make your CV stand out. And if anyone's interested, obviously you can drop us an email on contact@bhdi.org if you want to get interested. So the last bit I wanted to talk about, because I'm conscious of time, is interviews. So I've been doing interviews for the last 13 years when I've been a partner at the practice. So generally in interviews, I try and divide the interviews into 3 sections. The first section, I'm trying to find out a bit about the candidate, what makes them tick, what their interests are, just to find out about them, because this is someone who is going to work with you in your team. So you want to find out if this person is going to fit in. Second bit of the interview is why this job, why now? So why does this person want to work, want this job, and why now? So this will give you an understanding of where this person is in their career and how they see their career going in the next few years. This will also give you an understanding of whether this person is going to be, trying to come to your surgery or wherever for, a bit of a longer term, or it's a short term kind of thing. And the most important bit of the interview is the third bit of the interview, where I take the candidates through a number of scenarios. And this kind of really tests them, because the other bits of the interview are bits that you can generally prepare for. Quite easy to prepare, and they can give those prepared answers. Whereas this bit of the interview, there will be some scenarios that they never thought of. So this is a bit of an interview where you can actually see how the candidate thinks on their feet. It's very important, because in medicine, whether you're a doctor, nurse, or whatever you're working in, you have to do a lot of thinking on your feet, basically. You will always, almost on a daily basis, come across situations that you've never come across. So you're going to have to deal with it. So it will depend on whether I'm interviewing for a partner, for a salary GP, what those scenarios are. And maybe in the Q&A section, we can go through some of those scenarios if anyone's interested in that. But I'm conscious of time and just want to hand back over to Shah so we can go through some of the other presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Alim. So up next, we've got Saima Chowdhury. She works in a hospital as part of the pharmacy team. After Saima's done her presentation, we'll be taking a 5-minute break before we proceed on to the final 2 presentations and then Q&A. Saima, it's your turn.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Hello, everyone. My name is Saima Chowdhury, as I've been introduced. I'm one of the lead pharmacists in an NHS trust. Just to quickly tell you just briefly about myself. So I graduated from the School of Pharmacy in 1996, and I qualified as a pharmacist in 1997. I started my career in the NHS, working for the NHS since 97, since I graduated. So throughout my working career, I've taken a number of postgraduate courses, and I'm also an independent prescriber. And during my early career, I also did locuming in community pharmacies, just to see what the 2 different types are. So can we change slides? So you might think that pharmacy, I don't know what your perceptions are of pharmacy, but quite often when someone says I'm a pharmacist, we always assume that someone is working in a community pharmacy behind a counter, just dispensing some medication. So I'll go through quickly why pharmacy and the different staff that are, the different routes into pharmacy, not just a pharmacist, but then there are also technicians and pharmacy support staff. Okay, next slide, please. So why pharmacy? So pharmacy is a diverse and rewarding career with lots of opportunities in patient care, scientific research, and innovation. Pharmacists play a key role in helping patients feel better and getting well as quickly as possible. And then pharmacists can work in a number of professional settings. So I'll go through I've got a list of the types of careers available, so I'll go through that in a bit. And also pharmacists play key leadership roles in all aspects of healthcare systems. So a lot of the work currently is going on with Public Health England around the vaccination of patients, the COVID vaccine. So pharmacists get involved in a lot of situations. So first of all, I'll just quickly tell you about community pharmacy. Sorry. So pharmacists are usually known as dispensing chemists, and they are healthcare professionals who focus on safe and effective use of medicines. They're qualified to dispense prescriptions as well as give advice over the counter, such as remedies for minor ailments, and they work in various settings. So next slide, So just to quickly tell you about a community pharmacist. Community pharmacists usually work in their own pharmacy, or they can work in large chain pharmacies such as Boots, Lloyd's. Upcoming recently, there are a number of career opportunities that are expanding. So pharmacists are now working in healthcare centres, GP surgeries, and other areas such as CCG and other kind of like community-based areas as well, like care homes and nursing homes. Okay. So over the recent years, community pharmacists has become a bit more clinically focused, and they're taking on a more diverse role, such as blood pressure monitoring. They also administer flu vaccination, doing medication reviews, and a lot of the time, a lot of pharmacists in the CCG will do audits and work with GP practices. Okay. So I'm going to mainly focus my talk today on hospital pharmacists and the careers available. Career opportunities available. So hospital pharmacists, they're a vital part of the healthcare team, where the focus firmly is on patients. So some hospital pharmacists will attend ward rounds with the medical team. So in the hospital, you'll have where patients are being seen by a team of medical professionals. You usually have a pharmacist with them. They also provide a prescription monitoring service and prescribe advice to other healthcare professionals, not just patients. Okay, next slide, please. So there are a variety in terms of what you can do, and you'll always be working within a team of pharmacy staff, which includes pharmacists and pharmacist technicians. A qualified pharmacist can specialize later in your career conditions such as mental health, oncology. So later on in your career, further down the line, you can go to various different areas, like the GP, like the doctors specialize in areas. Pharmacists also specialize in different areas, and there's other roles as well. Some pharmacists don't want to become a clinical pharmacist, so they go into management roles as well. Okay. So there's also other career options. You don't have to go into community or hospital. So there's also there's industry pharmacists, where a lot of researching, designing and developing and testing of new medicines, ensuring that the safety and quality. So a lot of industry pharmacists get involved in the research and design of medications. Academia, some pharmacists go into academia and they go into teaching and training. You've also got what's called clinical academia, where pharmacists work in the hospital or a community, and at the same time they will take clinical research. And some pharmacists do actually go into government services, working for the Navy, Army or Air Forces. Okay. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick a list of other career options. So you've got all of these, and then you've also got primary care pharmacists, regulatory affairs pharmacists, pharmacists working in GP practices, like I've mentioned before. Some work in care homes. Some pharmacists also working in A&E and veterinary pharmacy as well. So those are just to name some of the specialist services. Okay. So just quickly, to qualify as a pharmacist, like Dr. Aleem has mentioned about medicine. So pharmacy is not a career that you can just kind of like wake up one day and say, okay, I want to become a pharmacist. So you have to know early enough that you want to do a pharmacy degree, because the universities look at the A-levels that you've done. So you have to do GCSEs, minimum 7 GCSEs, and usually they have to be at C or above. And then you need 3 A-levels. Again, chemistry is a must, like medicine. With pharmacy, chemistry is a must, and then you must have 2 other subjects from biology, physics, or maths. So those are the essential ones. And the grade, again, the different universities have different grades that they want. So I'm not going to go much into this because of timing. So if you wanted to become a pharmacist, you do have to complete a master's degree in pharmacy, and then you have, which is registered by the General Pharmaceutical Council, Once you've done that degree, you then need to complete a 1 year's pre-registration training in a pharmacy. So it could be in a hospital, it can be in a community. There's also industry placements as well, where you work under the supervision of a pharmacist. And then during this time, you demonstrate competency in a number of areas. You produce a portfolio as further evidence of your learning. So there's a lot of practical skills that need to be undertaken. You then have to pass a registration assessment. So if you don't pass that registration assessment, you get a further 2 attempts if you don't pass it at the first attempt. But unfortunately, after the 3rd attempt, you're not able to qualify or register. So each year you then have to, once you've done the exam and passed, you then apply for registration, which is essential if you want to practice as a pharmacist. So once you've registered and qualified and registered as a pharmacist, there's always lifelong learning. There's further education, there's postgraduate diplomas, postgraduate certificates that you have to undertake. And there's also continued professional development. You need to show continual professional development to renew your registration every year. Okay, so that's just a quick talk about pharmacy. The pharmacy world isn't just about pharmacists. There's also other staff that work there. And one of the other members of the team is the pharmacy technician, and they're a vital part of the pharmacy team. They usually work under the supervision of the pharmacist. They have to be registered with the GPHC. Again, like pharmacists, they work in many different environments. They can work in hospital, community, manufacturing units, even in prison. There are pharmacy technicians working in prisons as well. So in order to become a pharmacy technician, it's not a university degree. However, you have to do a BTEC in pharmaceutical sciences, which is usually via an apprenticeship route, and college attendance is necessary. So it's a 2-year program, but the candidate must be working in a pharmacy field. So you have to be in a pharmacy field. So in order to go and do this BTEC, you do need a minimum 5 GCSEs, grade C or above, and that has to include maths, English and science. Those are the essential ones. So the pharmacy technician as well, once they're qualified and registered, they also have lifelong learning. They go on to do other courses, and they go on to do different roles within the team. Then you have so some of the roles of the pharmacy technician include supplying medication to patients, assembling prescriptions, providing information to patients and other healthcare provisions. And in a hospital pharmacy, usually the pharmacy technician will be managing the dispensary. Some of the technicians will work alongside pharmacists on the ward once they've done certain other postgraduate qualifications. So they go on to do further training and learning, and then they go on to qualify to do other things. So they will go and see. So some of the technicians will go and do another part of the course, and then go and be able to see patients on the wards. Okay. They also do teaching and training of junior staff. So there's also pharmacy support staff, and pharmacy support staff, they're also known as assistant technical officers. So you might see them in the community. You might know them as counter staff. So they can work in community, they can work in NHS, manufacturing units, and they usually work under supervision of a pharmacy technician or pharmacist. Some of the roles here that they undertake are similar to the technicians, such as dispensing prescriptions. So usually this is via, again, an apprenticeship route, but it's an MVQ level 2, and also the candidate has to be working in a pharmacy field. Again, a minimum of 3 GCSEs are required, and then this pharmacy support role can lead you to progress to a BTEC in pharmaceutical sciences. Then if you think I'd like to be a pharmacy technician, it's a good start or stepping stone towards a BTEC and then qualifying as a technician. So just quickly to give you an understanding, can we go one step back, please? Just to quickly give you an understanding of what the different key members will be doing. So in the NHS, in a hospital pharmacy, usually on a day-to-day basis, some of the pharmacists will be working alongside the doctors on the wards, doing prescription monitoring, counselling patients on their medication, and also attending ward rounds. While another pharmacist may be seeing patients in the clinic, for example, the anticoagulation clinic, they might do some prescription writing. So that's, and then there'll be other pharmacists on other wards. They might not go to the ward rounds, but they might just be on the ward physically doing prescription monitoring. The technicians, some of them will be in the dispensary. They'll be running the dispensary. Some technicians with further qualifications will be working on the wards with the pharmacists. And then the support staff generally will dispense prescriptions. And there might be some support staff ordering medication with the procurement leads, who are usually technicians. Okay, so if you might think to yourself, so where do I start? So if you feel that you would like to pursue a career in pharmacy, but you don't want to go via that degree route, think about community pharmacy. If you're already working in a community pharmacy, if you have a part-time job and you think, okay, I'd like to pursue this, ask your pharmacist whether you can do the over-the-counter MVQ. You know, there's lots of opportunities. You don't have to be in a hospital setting to do that. You can do that in a community pharmacy. Then there's the NHS job website. So apprenticeship posts will be posted there. So if you think I'd like to pursue that, just look at that. Register for the NHS job website, and then you can see that some of the apprenticeship posts will be posted up on there. Okay, so just quickly, what if you think to yourself, what would a potential employer, would an employer potentially look for? Things that, to work in a pharmacy or in the pharmacy field, you must have attention to detail. You must have good customer service skills, good calculation skills, team working skills, and also, your employer might look at, say for example, if you went for an apprenticeship role, they'd look at how well you will adapt to working and studying at the same time. Your time management skills, would you be able to undertake that role? So those are just a couple of the things few of the things that the apprenticeship will look for in an apprentice. Again, interviews and thing can also vary depending on the type of role that you're going through and what the job entails. So just look at, if you are applying for jobs in the NHS, look at the person specs, look at the job description, look at the person specs, write things around the person specs as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Can hear an echo. So we're at 6:30 now. Can I ask Simon to put myself on mute, because I think I can hear myself talking. We're at 6:30. I'd like to propose that we have a 5-minute break for anybody who needs it on the call. If we can rejoin at 6:35, so in 5 minutes, we will then move on to clinical and data sciences, and then teaching before we move on to Q&A. All right, I'll just put a slide up just to let everybody know what time we're starting back up again, so that everybody's aware. Please feel free to take your break now. I'll start speaking again in about 5 minutes. All right, it's now 6:35. Would like to resume again. This time round, it is Parvez who is going to go through clinical data sciences.
Thank you, Shah. What I'll do is I'll start off by, before I share the screen, I'll just introduce myself over the video. So I don't know if anyone can see me, but I have activated the video. So yeah, hi, welcome everyone to the clinical data sciences section. So my name is Parvez Sheikh Taj. I've been in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry for the last 15 years. And my career has taken me to different parts of Europe. So I've lived on the continent for about 6 years. So 4 years in Germany, in Berlin, and then subsequently in Biberach, working for 2 of the biggest German pharmaceutical companies, Bayer and then subsequently Boehringer Ingelheim. And then I was working in Belgium and Czech Republic as well for medical device and pharmaceutical companies. So some of the companies I've worked for is GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, Merck, Bayer I've mentioned, a couple of biotech companies, including BioNTech. And today what I'd like to do is I'm mindful of the fact that we have about 23 minutes left, but I want to give you a quick introduction over what the clinical data sciences and life sciences degrees can actually take you into, what kind of careers they will take you into, and what kind of opportunities are there. A lot of the stuff will actually tie in with what the other speakers have spoken about, and will also tie in with Rahul will be speaking about. So medicine, pharmacy, project management, IT. One of the things you'll notice is that regardless of the fields that you go into, the academic qualifications combined with your aptitude and volunteering experience will make you stand out from the crowd. So the purpose of today's workshop has been to really not only introduce you to the different topics and different subject areas, but really to understand, okay, what can I do with my CV that's going to make me stand out from the rest? What am I going to do what am I going to do or say during the interviews? How am I going to prepare for the interviews that's going to make me stand out from the competition? So when you have information that we have provided you end up going to provide you with, if you combine that with certain, what I would say, thinking outside the box, you don't want to be coming across like any other candidate. Something needs to stand out about you. And that's something you can always talk about with your families, friends, careers advisors at your college, university, and also your course leaders. So that's a quick introduction. I actually studied biotechnology for my bachelor's degree, and then I did my master's in bioreactor systems, which is a combination of biotechnology and chemical engineering. And I did that at Westminster University and then at University of Manchester. And then that sort of initiated my sort of career into clinical data sciences. So without further ado, let me jump into the slides and we can go take you through all of that. So next slide, please, Shah. So to start off with, what is data science? And in particular, clinical data science. So it's the overarching sort of ethos is that you're working in a field that's sort of dealing with data reporting, extraction, organization, and interpretation of clinical trial data, as well as the technologies needed to acquire the above. So it really means that not only are you looking at the clinical data that's collected at patient level and what the patient data will sort of look, but also dealing with the technologies. So by technology, I mean, we need a clinical database that captures all the clinical research for all the patients before it's submitted to the regulators for approval. So one very recent example would be the COVID-19 vaccine. There was a lot of work going on. I myself was involved with developing that vaccine for one of the companies, which I'm not going to name. But it really does require you to be able to capture the data into a clinical database. And it's called electronic data capture, which is like in the old days, you had a paper CRF, case report form. You'd fill that in and you'll fax it over to the company that's doing the clinical research. And then that will get documented by some data entry staff. These days, the actual data is collected at the site using electronic data capture, which means you're actually at the clinical investigation site. The research nurse or the doctor will actually enter the patient's data into the electronic data system. And then that data comes straight to us as clinical data scientists for us to review, analyze, and draw up various reports, graphs, charts to analyze and understand, A, what's going on with the patient, if they're actually benefiting from the new drugs and vaccines, or are there a lot more side effects than we had hoped? So you look at the trends and patterns, and it helps you to get a real-time understanding of whether or not this new drug or the new vaccine that's being launched into the world, is it actually helping people or not? So, for example, the COVID-19 vaccine, it's been shown that it's 90 to 95% effective. That's a huge amount of people who actually benefited from the COVID-19 vaccine compared to the 5 or 10% that didn't. And the 5 or 10% of the people that didn't benefit, it could be a whole host of reasons. It could be the fact that they've already got complicated pre-existing medical conditions, or other drugs and vaccines that they're taking, which interferes with the new drug or the vaccine that they're taking. So that's just a quick broad overview. If you take me to the next slide, please, Shah. Thank you. So why choose a career in the clinical development of drugs, of novel drugs and vaccines? Why not go into medicine and pharmacy? Why not go into IT and project management? Why not go into teaching? Why not go into any other fields? Well, one of the key reasons is that being in the clinical development world means you're actually contributing to the very frontiers of advancement of science and scientific knowledge and medical knowledge. So you're developing the very latest in terms of the drugs, the vaccines, the medications that will come out, and hopefully impact positively many people around the world. So, for example, the COVID-19, it was a clinical development phase, which meant that you went through phase 1, 2, and 3 of clinical phase trials. And now it's being, I mean, if you were working in the COVID-19 vaccine, you were pretty much working at the cutting edge of scientific discovery and so forth. So the key thing to bear in mind is when you're going into the area of clinical development, and we'll talk about the different branches of clinical development, the key thing to bear in mind as young people, you're looking to go into, you know, a world of opportunities out there. The world really is your oyster at the moment. Despite the pandemic, you have to ask yourself what area is going to give you that satisfaction and fulfillment that you know, the other speakers talked about as well. And in this area, you're basically, if you come up with a new vaccine or a medication, it can benefit people for generations to come. One example would be, for example, Pfizer's Lipitor is a cholesterol drug. It's absolute blockbuster of a drug that's been going on for several years. And even after it loses its patent, it's still being formulated, manufactured by other companies, but the original formulation does come from a particular source, a particular company that invented it or discovered it, and then got the license to administer it to people around the world. So I've mentioned cholesterol. There are drugs and medications, novel drugs and vaccines being discovered and being rolled out for stroke, for cardiovascular heart disease, oncology, also known as cancer treatments, and renal or kidney diseases. So you can actually go into different therapeutic areas. So I mentioned briefly earlier the different kind of career pathways within sort of clinical development. So biostatistics is one of them. So you basically be studying at university maths or stats. And once you've sort of got your degree as a biostatistician, what you're doing is you're working with the clinical data scientists to analyze and look at the statistical probability of certain drugs being effective. What is the statistical sort of significance of certain drugs and vaccines? So if somebody here is really into their maths, it's something to consider. And I'll mention these salaries very briefly, because I know as young people, everyone likes to talk about money. It's all easy. It's all too easy these days to say, you know what, I want to become a YouTuber and make lots of money. And sometimes we forget that some of the fields of science and medicine out there can actually be very, very well paid jobs if you go about it the right way. Clinical programming is basically you're dealing with SAS programming to design the clinical database where the patient's data will be collected. So you would need IT or computer science related degree, or even maths. Clinical data scientists or data managers, so life sciences, so something like I did, biotechnology or biochemistry, maths, or even sometimes if you can basically merge the two, then IT or computer science related subjects will help you get through the door. Clinical monitors or clinical research associates, so they are basically positions where they go into the actual site and make sure that they're complying with international regulations. We call them good clinical practice. And all, and this is just a general kind of information, all drugs and vaccines that are sort of that go through the clinical trial process have to adhere to stringent international and national regulations. So in the UK, we have the MHRA. In the US, they have FDA, Federal Food and Drug Administration. And the purpose of making sure that the clinical research associates going to the actual sites where the patients are being treated is to make sure those clinical investigation sites are conducting and performing and reporting the data according to these very tight international regulations. And if they don't, then there will be repercussions, including legal action against the doctor or the actual institution, the scientific institution. Clinical project managers, they are basically the people that bring together all the roles that you can see there. And for that, you would need sometimes a PhD in life sciences or medicine. And finally, the medical monitors, who primarily tend to be people who have a medical degree, and they basically look at the sort of the medical side of each and every patient's data that's coming in to determine whether or not they're having too many side effects, and if those side effects are actually going to impact their lives in a very serious way. The very last thing I want to point out is a very important quote that I think it's very pertinent to the audience here, which is a quote by Jim Rohn, who unfortunately passed away in 2009, I believe. And he was an American business philosopher and mindset specialist. And I know Shabay talked about mindset earlier. The major question to ask in your job is not what you are getting paid, but who you are becoming. So what kind of skills, expertise, knowledge, social skills, interpersonal skills are you developing that's going to help you grow as a person, that's going to help you climb up the ladder of your career. And on that note, in terms of the salary scale, these positions you see there, they will start off slow, but once you've had a few years of experience, if you become a consultant, you could be earning six figures. And I know people who are doing it. Six-figure incomes is not unheard of in this industry, depending on how much experience you have, how you present yourself to the industry, what kind of experience you've got, and whether it's a contract job or a permanent job, whether you are specializing in a certain field, if you've gone into, if you've developed other skills alongside your mainstream skills in your job. These things, you can be earning over £100,000, but it does require a lot of focus, dedication, and hard work, but it is very rewarding at the same time. But the main thing is, we don't get to £100,000 salary just like that. It's about having the right mindset. The very first job you get as a graduate, you should be focusing on developing the skills, the knowledge, having a very strong foundation that's going to help you build your career up over a period of 15, 20, 25 years. Next slide, please. So how do I get into clinical data science specifically? So A-levels or BTech or IB in sort of chemistry, biology, maths, IT, or physics. University degree in maths, life sciences, such as biotechnology, biochemistry, or even computer science or IT related subjects. And the key thing to bear in mind, as I was saying earlier, is start small, aim big. Your first job in the field of data science or any other field that any of the speakers mention here, it can lead to a world of other possibilities and new possibilities, but it's about starting small and having a big vision and working towards your vision. Next slide, please. Interviews, I will keep this very brief because I know the other speakers have mentioned as well. So the key thing to bear in mind is not to be shy to express your talents on paper and in person at the interview. So a lot of the times what we find is that people have this an inside kind of tug of war going on between being humble and blowing your own trumpet. And it's about understanding that when you apply for a job, you have to stand out from the crowd. So humility in a job application, you have to park aside your humility and literally blow your own trumpet. Now, it doesn't mean becoming an arrogant person. It just means being confident, being self-assured, knowing what skills and knowledge you have, and being very open about it and talking to the interviewer about it, or putting it down in a CV. But of course, in other aspects of life, we need to maintain our humility and humbleness, dealing with our friends, family, colleagues, etc. The first impressions and in person, is very, very important, whether it's on the paper or in person. So one of the things that I have seen as well over the years is that with young people, when they apply for a job, they'll put something to the effect of, I want to study, or I want to work in this role because. And it's one of the most mundane sentences you can start off with. Make it catchy, make it different. You can start off with something like, the world of medicine fascinates me, or the world of clinical data science has fascinated me since early days of my secondary school. Whatever it is, make it stand out from the crowd. Perfect practice makes perfect. There's a technique called Kaizen technique, K-E-I-Z-E-N, Kaizen technique, and it basically means reviewing the work that you've done, whether it's the interview or the CV that you've done, and just understanding what really went well in that interview and what didn't, and what can you do next time to make your interview performance be more effective so you can land that job. So it's about perfect practice, reviewing where did you slip up, where did you do well, and learning from that. And sometimes you just have to speak with your friends and family to help you practice. Next slide, please. That's it. Thank you very much. I tried to make it as short as possible, and I'm sure there will be a few questions later on, but I'll hand over to Shah and then Rahul.
Thank you, Parvez. We've now got Rahul, who will be presenting the teaching occupation. I am just putting a short message on the chat window just to let everybody know that we expect to finish this program around 7:30. I apologize for the delay. We did start a little bit later than expected, and we've tried to cover off as much as possible. So please bear with us. We expect, as I said, 7:30. Rahul, I will let you start and bring up your presentation.
Okay. Right, Shah, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Again, I won't keep everyone too long. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of teaching and how to get into teaching and the type of things that you might actually face when you are trying to get into teaching. One of the first things I actually wanted to go through was dispel a few myths and a few bits of reality about teaching. So why would you want to go into teaching? Most people, I think, the first thing they think about is the holidays. Teachers get amazing holidays, 12 weeks of the year they are off, doing nothing, whilst everyone else has to work. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Most subjects have their assessment periods the week before any holidays. So you've got half-termly assessments as well as end-of-term assessments. An average teacher will have around 9 to 10 classes, and again, those classes will be about 30 students in each class. So you're looking at about 300 scripts or so, maybe just under, per holiday that you have to mark. And that's on top of any kind of like data inputting and so on and so forth. So a huge amount of your time during your holiday time would be spent marking, preparing, and so on. And it's actually unlike most jobs where when you're on holiday, you're on holiday, you are not expected to work. However, in teaching, you are. The next thing, a lot of people would think, oh, teachers have excellent pay and conditions, amazing pensions, and so on. Unfortunately, again, that's not the case. If you want a highly paid job with excellent conditions, there are plenty of jobs out there who will pay you more for doing a lot less than teaching. So it's unfortunately, again, not the case. However, job satisfaction and job security, actually, job security, it's a very secure job if you are teaching the right subject. So, for example, if you are a core teacher, so English, maths, chemistry, sciences, I can't imagine a school would be willing to get rid of a teacher who teaches those subjects. However, depending on what level of education you're teaching at, so for example, adult education, EAL teachers, and so on, when budgets are getting tighter and redundancies are made, those subjects and teachers are the ones that are made redundant more so than any of the other subjects. And unfortunately, this is a growing trend as budgets get cut for education. Job security is going down in certain subjects. Job satisfaction is, I would say, huge when it comes to teaching. That is the main reason why you want to go into teaching. It is a true vocation. Teachers are teachers because they love to teach, and if you're not one of those teachers, then you shouldn't be in the classroom. I've actually met lots of teachers who don't enjoy teaching young people or interacting with the young people, and I think, why are you a teacher? Because that is the fundamentals of your job. So it is a very satisfying job so long as you are in it for the right reasons. Every day is different from the last. I was a teacher before I gave it up a couple of years ago for about 15 years, and over that time you accumulate a huge bank of resources. So I could just turn up to a class, open up my computer, and teach whatever subjects I needed to, because I've planned those lessons already. But every time I teach a lesson that I've pre-done, it's a different lesson, because the people you're teaching aren't the same. So it's not a 9-to-5 job where you're doing the same thing over and over again. You are teaching people, and people are different every time. So that's a huge plus. And the fact that you're making a difference in young people's lives, again, hugely satisfying, and it makes your job really worthwhile. One of the key things that people think about teaching before they go into it, they think, oh, I'm good at a subject, and therefore I'm going to be automatically an excellent teacher at it. And that just really isn't the case. I've met plenty of PhD mathematicians. My background is in maths. I'm a maths teacher, and met plenty of PhD mathematicians who've come into teaching and cannot teach at all. It's not because they don't know the subjects, it's because they can't communicate the subject. And obviously communication is essential. Teaching, again, there are lots of different types of teaching. I'm just going to go through that briefly. There's early years teaching between 0 and 5 years old, primary school between 4 and 11 years, secondary school teaching 11 to 16, further education, FE college or sixth forms 16 to 19. You've got teachers, teaching pupils with special educational needs and or disabilities. So that's what SEND stands for. as well as working as teachers overseas. And it could be any of the above, but you're in a foreign country, most likely teaching in a UK based school system, so that everything that you would do in the UK you are basically doing in a foreign country. Some of the things that you need to know about teaching, so qualified teacher status is really important, and you will hear QTS mentioned in a lot of the training courses that you might be applying for, whether they give you QTS at the end or you have to then go ahead and apply for QTS separately. So QTS is qualified teacher status. And you must have QTS to be able to teach or take up a teaching post in any primary, secondary, or even special schools in the UK. Again, maintained schools. So what that means is they are funded by the state, usually funded and overseen by a local authority. QTS may not be as applicable to private schools or public funded, privately funded schools, where they've got more of a leeway to who they can employ. Ways into teaching. There are two main ways, really. You are either an undergraduate or a postgraduate. And so the undergraduate route would be to do some kind of a, after your A-levels, to do some kind of a degree. So undergraduate initial teacher training, it would be a 3-year university course, after which you get yourself a BA or a BEd, BSc, undergraduate degree in education. You can either do that in primary or secondary education, and at the end you get your QTS as well. And there is a similar thing for early years learning as well. It's the qualifications and so on are very similar. It's just that you are restricted to only teaching up to 5-year-olds, and by the end you get your early years teacher status, and that's it, really. I mean, there's nothing wrong with these courses, but to do these courses, you have to know that you want to be a teacher, because you are specializing in a degree in teaching and education. And so you are limiting yourself down that avenue. Undergraduate wise, there are a few other less popular courses out there. So school-centered initial teacher training. So again, this one is school-led, and the big advantage of this over the university ones would be the fact that you get a lot of hands-on experience at the school rather than at the university. You've got a level 5 diploma in post-16 education. But again, you're restricting yourself to only teaching post-16, as well as further teachers, future teachers scholars program. This is mainly for outstanding A-level students with a passion for physics and maths. And again, it's a university-led program. So that is a very brief overview of undergraduate courses or ways into teaching. There are so many different ways. And I'll give you the relevant links at the end of this presentation. Postgraduate, again, is for people who have a degree in a subject, but not necessarily in education. And teaching is one of those subjects, unlike the other subjects that's been spoken about, where you can just wake up one day and decide, you know what, I want to be a teacher. And so there are avenues into teaching. The most common one for postgraduates would be the PGCE, so Postgraduate Certificate in Education. It's a 1-year course, university-led, and there's a lot of school work experience built into that course as well. And at the end, you do get yourself a QTS. Teach First is another really popular course that's come in the last 10 years or so, I think, or maybe just a little bit more. It's a school-led 2-year course, and you must, to get onto the course, you must have at least a 2-1 in your degree, whichever subject that you've done. And by the end, you don't get a qualified teacher's status, but you do get a postgraduate diploma in education. But again, The thing with QTS is the fact that it is recognized in different countries, and you can just go to certain countries and just start teaching without any problems because it is a recognized qualification, whereas a postgraduate diploma in education may not be it may not be as easy to just go teach in a different country. Schools Direct salaried. Again, Schools Direct is a school-based program where you learn as you earn as you train, basically. So you can go in there with your degree in whichever subject, apply for the Schools Direct program, and the program will place you into schools, and you are employed by the school as a new teacher, even though you may not necessarily have any experience. Obviously, you'll be supported by that school on how to teach and so on and so forth, but you do get a salary for that. There are variations on these kind of courses. So again, you've got your postgraduate early years initial teacher training, again 1-year course, university led, and by the end you get your early years teaching status. Schools Direct tuition fees versions as well, and it's slightly different where it's more you get more of a choice between where it is that you can you're working, and there are certain courses and so on that are university led or school led as well. But again, this is, you have to pay fees and you don't get a wage because you are not employed by the school. As well as this over here, school-centered initial teacher training, similar to the undergraduate program that I spoke about earlier. It's a 1-year course. Yeah, so and you must have a undergraduate degree to go into this course. Just to say that if you are a teacher from another country and you don't have a QTS and you want to teach in a school in this country, you have to get yourself QTS, and you can do an assessment only a QTS qualification. And again, there are universities and placements that you can look at to get that qualification. Your role as a teacher. What does that mean? Well, a lot of people, the first thing that they think of is you're standing in front of a class teaching. A phrase you will hear a lot in these courses is in loco parentis, you are in place of a parent. That is your main role. You are a teacher, yes, you're a classroom teacher teaching subject, but your main role is the well-being of your students, their mental, the physical, and you know, it's even spiritual well-being in your classroom. And so that is your main role, and secondary is your role as a teacher in your classroom. But there are other roles as well that you have to fulfill. You will most likely be a tutor as well. So you've got your tutor group that has got nothing to do with your subject in any way, but you are looking after them. You know, their mental well-being, how they're getting on in school, are there any issues, and so on. You may be part of mentors roles or mentoring schemes and role model schemes and so on. Where pupils who may lack you know, certain privileges that other students have, and you may need to be a mentor to them just to make sure that they are doing okay in their school life. You will have to work with support departments. So, for example, the SEND support department, working with local authorities, dealing with vulnerable children and making sure that they are protected in any way that they may need. You obviously have to work with parents and carers. You know, as a teacher, you have to be able to communicate with parents and carers. You know, at the end of the day, you are looking after their children for a huge amount of their day. Data analysis is a huge part of a teacher's job. what I find is, as a classroom teacher, probably 50% of my job was a classroom teacher. The other half of my job were the rest of the roles that I've spoken about, and data analysis was a huge part of my role. Again, I was in charge of Key Stage 5, which was A-levels in school, and with that role, there were about 200 students that I had to track and monitor, and the only way to track and monitor students was to look at data, grades, marks that they're getting, and number crunching those, and being able to analyze that data was huge. Curriculum development and working with different members in your team, as well as different colleagues in other departments, again, is really essential. As you progress, you're going to be in managerial roles, managing people, performance management of those people, again, is a necessity, and the list goes on. So, you know, it's not just standing in front of a class and teaching. My route into teaching, it wasn't really the first choice that I had, if I'm honest with you. I always thought I was going to go into teaching later on in life, something, you know, I would have my career in some other field and then decide, you know, as a retirement, almost like winding down, I can go into teaching. That really is not the time to go into teaching. You know, teaching is a hugely demanding role. I didn't, like I said, initially want or think about teaching. So my first degree was in astrophysics. So I've got a BSc in astrophysics. After that, I went into IT and did a master's in IT. I worked as a financial advisor for a year and a bit, and I hated that job. And one of my friends was actually studying for a PGC, and they were saying, why don't you try teaching? So I thought I'd give teaching a go. I did a PGCE in maths, even though I had a degree in astrophysics. Maths was, I felt, a better fit. And, you know, it was really the best decision I made. I was teaching for 15 years, and I really did enjoy my time as a teacher. A little bit about pay scales. Like I said, teachers aren't the most highly paid people. So as you start your career, you will go into the main pay scale, and the pay scale starts like this. So you go into M1 all the way up to M6, and depending on your experience, the subject you're teaching, and you know, the way you come across in the interview, you can start at a different level. So for example, I started at the time 15 years ago, the pay scales were different, but I started on M3 because I was a maths teacher and I was willing to take on responsibility for dealing with Key Stage 5, which was A-levels. So the scales you see here are just a classroom teacher. You have no other responsibilities in terms of, you haven't decided to take on a key stage or work with you know, managerial roles or anything like that. So after the main pay scale, you can go on to the upper pay scale. Again, you know, these pay scales are for extra things that you might be doing. Going back to the main pay scale, actually, you should assume that you can progress onto the next pay scale each year, provided that you are meeting certain performance management targets. Unfortunately, that has become quite usual now in schools where it is performance management led, and it's not assumed that you can go onto the next pay scale just because you've been there for a certain time. Lastly, how to stand out in a crowd. So, you know, there's a huge amount of competition when it comes to jobs out there, but as a teacher, you know, depending on the subject that you teach, you could be actually quite sought after. But before you go on to any courses or anything like that, I would suggest that you volunteer as a TA or go and observe classes and so on, so that you do realize what you are actually getting into. Gain experience when you're on that teaching course, gain experience teaching different key stages, so for A-levels or borderline classes, because that is what helps you stand out. And it's not a usual thing that you will be given an A-level class or a borderline class in your training year, because those classes are so crucial. So if you're not given those classes to teach in those years, make sure you go along and observe a teacher, teaching those classes, and go help out in those classes, so that you've gained the experience of seeing how to teach those classes. Again, by borderline classes, I mean the ones that are, going back to the old grading system. B grade student, how do you push them onto becoming A and A star students? C moving on to B, D's onto C's, and so on. So those borderline classes are really important to schools and their data. The summer before you start any teaching courses or any teaching positions, go through all of the key stages, go buy yourself the books, go work through them, and make sure you're familiar with the content that you're going to be delivering. Go on to the Times Educational Supplement. That's the main place that teachers go to look for jobs, and just go see what kind of jobs that there are and what kind of job specs that are out there. In teaching, you don't actually have a CV per se. You don't sit there, like Shah was saying, about the CVs, how to actually write them and so on. You don't have that in teaching. What you have is a job application and a covering letter. And most of those applications are very similar. Covering letters are also similar. So go and download from the TES a job description, complete an application, write a covering letter, and so it's all prepared for you, ready to go. So when you apply for any kind of jobs in teaching, it's a relatively painless experience. One of the things that I would say is, as a teacher, because data is so important, you have to be proficient in the use of ICT, but more so in spreadsheets, and in particular Excel or Google Sheets, because you use those kind of programs day in, day out to help your understanding of the students that are in front of you. I'm just going to share actually a typical hold on, let me just see. Just give me a second. So if I share with you a typical, I hope everyone can see that. So this is a spreadsheet that a school spreadsheet that we might use. So every number that you see here has been entered by a teacher, but every analysis that bits of analysis that you see is done by Excel. So for example, I didn't know how to use pivot tables, so I went and if you have a look at the top over here, I wrote a nested if statement so that it converts the mark that a teacher enters into a grade. Then someone asked me, why don't you just use a pivot table? So I learned how to do that, and so then I've got pivot tables going on here as well. Count if statements, other rules and formulae, and so on and so forth. You don't have to use these things. You don't have to be able to use them. But what it does is makes your life a lot easier. And what it also does is, if you can use this when you go for an interview, it makes you a lot more employable than someone who would sit there for hours looking at, oh, that's a 49, that's a grade E, that's 64, that's a grade C, and hand entering all of this data. So, being proficient in IT is essential as a teacher. And with that, I think that's the end of my presentation. So I'll hand back to Shah.
Thank you, Rahul. Much appreciated. Okay, just before I pass to Parvez, he will be chairing the next section. So this is where we will take Q&A. Can I just ask all the presenters to turn on their video? Please remember what I said in the beginning. Feel free to use the chat window to submit your questions. Raise your hand. There's an icon right on the top line of the Teams features. And Parvez, just so you're aware, I've printed out some questions that we've already had submitted via email, but let's go with those who are here first, and then I can go through some of these questions here.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to all the speakers for your very informative and industry-wide experience and knowledge that you've gained over the last many years of your careers. And I'm sure the attendees here will sort of take on board many of the insights, tips, and knowledge that you've shared with them to apply to their own future careers and educational career paths.